I wrote this pamphlet myself. I had the idea to hold it in my hands because what interested the media? The fact I was in handcuffs.
After 17 years in exile in China, the former leader of the Bamboo Union returned home, holding up a pamphlet advocating the reunification of Taiwan and China. Released on bail, White Wolf, who claimed to have given up crime, founded a political party. In the run-up to the 2016 elections, he set out to destabilize Taiwan's fledgling democracy and discredit the frontrunner candidate. The possible victory of this verdant advocate of autonomy from China seriously irritated Beijing. Most of White Wolf's activists are members of the Bamboo Union. Still, today, at his party's headquarters adorned with bamboo plants, he educates them in politics.
有一个问题哦，一定要过两岸的统一。美国是最不希望中国统一，最不希望中国能够再复兴，怎么办？不否认。
I don't deny that there are a lot of Mafia members in our party.
承认。
That's true.
但是，记住一点。
But you need to know that all Taiwanese Mafia members mix with politicians.
挂钩。
White Wolf has a score to settle with Taiwanese democracy. But the man who owns factories in China may have an additional motivation.
The leverage. A lot of mafia branch or mafia member, if they do the business in China, the Chinese government or Beijing government will tell them, okay, fine, you can work here, you can make your business, and you can make your money. But on the other hand, you have to do some work for me.
In the 2016 elections, White Wolf obtained a derisory score. Worse still, the thorn in Beijing's side was elected president.
My concept doesn't work, for the time being, because the Taiwanese don't want to negotiate with China.
While the electoral game had proved unsuccessful for the Triads, other methods still remained. In 2017, Nathan Law from Hong Kong was enthusiastically received in Taiwan. He was one of the activists of the pro-democracy movement rallying in Hong Kong to safeguard the freedoms threatened by Beijing since the handover.
我真的觉得台湾的民主选举混得很成熟，所以会令我更有动力去做香港要做的事情。
But on his return home, Nathan Law was set upon by White Wolf's troops and Bamboo Union henchmen.
That day, we received a mobilization order, but I took a sick leave. I had a doctor's certificate, so I didn't go.
There were some gangster groups who charged to us. Luckily, I was not injured in Taiwan, but I was injured in Hong Kong International Airport when another group of these gangster-like group assaulted me.
For months, Hong Kongers had been opposing Xi Jinping's move to take away their last remaining political freedoms. The Triads saw this as an opportunity to demonstrate their loyalty to the Red Emperor. The editor of the leading pro-democracy newspaper was brutally attacked. Then, booksellers who had published a book hostile to Xi Jinping mysteriously disappeared. One of them reappeared in China in the hands of the police. Hong Kongers were terrified. Businessman Desmond Shum, who had close ties with the Chinese government, was in Hong Kong at that time to meet with Triad leaders. He was seeking their help to recover a debt from a shady business partner.
I meet them over dinner and they will tell me about all the things they do. So they were telling me they have linkage to Beijing, the Ministry of Public Security. In the exchange, they talk about the bookstore kidnapping. The Public Security Bureau of China went to him and said, well, can you help me to abduct this person? Because, the Triads, they always do smugglings in between China and Hong Kong. Then giving my knowledge and background on how to deal with CCP bureaucrats. They will consult with me like, should I help them this? Should I not help them this? Who should I talk to? That kind of questions.
Summer 2019, the moment of truth has arrived. A desperate population was protesting against a law that would place them definitively under Beijing's control. The authorities were overwhelmed. It was then that the Triads got involved on July 21st.
They attacked people randomly. Even though a pregnant woman and elderly said they are just passing by, they also were attacked. Evidence shows that the police knew that, but they did nothing to stop them.
Only a handful of gangsters would be arrested. In this archival footage, we even see a pro-Beijing politician congratulating the attackers. This violence stunned the demonstrators and gave the police a pretext to restore order. Shortly afterwards, Beijing law prevailed. A triad paraded its taxicabs as a sign of victory. As in the days of Big-Eared Du, the Triads put themselves at the service of oppression. Nathan Law is the only opposition leader free today.
When I was in prison, one of the gangsters came to me and kind of like explained what had happened. He was basically paid to do it. He wasn't involved in politics, but he took it as a job. But who paid? This is the big question yet to be resolved.
Xi Jinping appointed Hong Kong's police chief at the head of the executive as a reward for his services.
Zhang Li, the new chief executive, was probably the mastermind behind all these gangsters police collaboration. And also, we've seen many big corporations' bosses are from the Triad gangsters groups. They can mobilize people to do harm to the democratic movement.
The Sun Yee-on, first and foremost, has managed to draw the most advantage from its political choices. After film producer Charles turned down the job, the four-eyed dragon handed over the reins of the Triad to his son, a lawyer. It is he who manages the Hung family's vast interests, such as the Hong Kong telecom giant acquired for $250 million. The family is suspected of various financial crimes, but its links with traditional crime, now become less profitable, are weakening, while not being completely severed.
Those senior people from the Sun Yee-on, how much involvement do they need to have in criminality? Not much, but they need to have access to the resources of those triad societies sometimes when they need to send a message to someone or use violence. So they're not directly involved most of the time in prostitution, extortion, drugs, because they don't need to be.
Everything evolves. Even the loyalty of the soldiers come to pay their last respects to a member of the Hung family.
Nobody would do the initiation ceremony anymore. Someone approach you, give me your mobile number, and I get you in my WhatsApp group. So they are not very loyal to their protector like before. Basically, if you have the money-making opportunity, then I'll follow you. If you don't, then I will switch to follow another dialogue. So last week you were 14K, this week you can be Sun Yee-on, and next week you can be Wo Sing Wo.
Charles has also moved with the times. His studios no longer produce gangster films, a subject now frowned upon by the authorities, but blockbusters more in line with Beijing's cultural ambitions. "60 years after its creation by an anti-communist officer, the Sun Yee-on Triad has put itself at the service of the Red Empire. No triad is now beyond the reach of Beijing's influence." The Dragon Head, the godfather of godfathers of Celestial Alliance, has just died. The Triad had become the most powerful one in Taiwan, and perhaps the world. The police could only stand by and watch their show of strength. The Taiwanese authorities have never succeeded in banning membership of a Triad. Only the associated crimes and misdemeanors are prosecuted.
首先，我们礼请治商委员会主记者礼请主任委员。
The director finds the images very solemn.
Yes, they're powerful.
请就主继位。
Shortly before, the Iron Tyrant had been appointed successor to the deceased by the other leaders, despite his reputation for being impulsive.
即亲友代表吴泽宏、吴耀芳、李秀明、李玉彤、廖冰红。
其实最有声望的是应该
The one with the most prestige was my godfather.
那因为我们就有开个会
But at the beginning of the meeting, he said he was too old to be a leader and that we should let a young person take over. For his funeral, we wanted to do something solemn and orderly so as to highlight our unity.
潘春玲、蔡月如、蔡华龙、邓可。
Some 300 branches or associated groups of Celestial Alliance filed past that day. In Taiwan, in Asia, and around the world, each of these branches is at the helm of both illegal and legal activities. The list is endless. Hotels, gambling, extortion, construction, pawnbroking, hostess bars, drug trafficking, finance, arms dealing, media. And at the head of this empire was now the Iron Tyrant.
For example, if members of the Heaven branch and those of the Unbreakable branch have a conflict, their leaders consult one another. If it doesn't work out, it comes back to me. If violence is used, it must respect the code of honor. If you betrayed your commitments to the leaders, if you haven't respected your godfather, if you've allowed yourself to do that sort of thing, we know how to punish harshly.
Such power goes hand in hand with having solid relations in the political world, as demonstrated by the presence of a group of city councilors. In Taiwan, all the Triads cultivate relationships with the political parties. Celestial Alliance with the ruling party, Bamboo Union with the opposition.
Generally speaking, if you work with this or that political party, then you're going to do business with that party. We would meet up at banquets, dinners. We have a drink, we talk. We try to make things stable and prosperous together.
Despite the efforts of the police, the Triads co-run the small towns. Through corruption, the Triads win public contracts from waste management to transport. Their economic and political hold, backed by religion, is not without consequences. At a time when Xi Jinping is announcing his intention to take Taiwan by any means necessary.
I was in the nightlife business, the sex industry. I also did construction work. I was sort of half worker, half gangster. I realized that being a gangster really just meant helping the Godfather make money. Besides, he's not the one who'll end up in jail. It's the little gangster. So I stopped. It didn't make any sense.
After leaving Bamboo Union, Holger set up a gym as well as a popular YouTube channel devoted to fitness. But in 2019, the threat of invasion, as well as the repression in Hong Kong, led him to start talking politics.
After seeing that, we thought, what about Taiwan?
On the strength of his popularity, Holger called for demonstrations against the pro-Beijing power brokers, including one of the main television channels.
They were broadcasting China's military exercises. These people were showing you the knife that's going to kill you, and they were telling you that the knife is beautiful, that it's strong. Are you crazy? Do you have a mental problem?
The mobilization was an unexpected success. The television channel was banned. Holger also went after the leader of his former triad, White Wolf.
He's just helping the CCP in Taiwan. He's an infiltrator. The scumbag who's setting fire to the house.
In Taiwan, there are a lot of people who criticize me, but I don't give a damn. I'm not going to shoot him. He's not even worth killing.
The shooter was a member of Bamboo Union. The police concluded, however, that it was a simple case of vengeance, as the day before the man had come to make sexual advances on Holger, who had firmly rebuffed him. Several months later, the intelligence services took over the investigation at the instigation of a member of parliament from the ruling party. Wang had long been fighting Triad infiltration of the political world, including within his own party.
All the person related with this gunshot is from a mafia, 竹联帮, one branch. They create some argument with the YouTuber. We call that a cut point to avoid investigators find out who are really behind of this. So according to the investigation, a lot of evidence lead this assassin to Beijing.
Wang would not say more. The investigation was still ongoing. The investigation also uncovered weapon caches all over the country.
If they can smuggle in drugs, dirty money, or weapons, one day that route will become the invasion line to invade Taiwan. It's not only one mafia. Inside different mafia, some member become this kind of tools of communist. Legal guns, according to the figures we have, they can equip 1 to 3 brigade troops. The number is numerous.
2 or 3 brigades. That's between 16 and 24,000 men.
If during some conflict happen, they can go on the street, try to sabotage the society.
With so much provocation from Taiwan, we'll have to deal with military unification. I hope no one dies. I'm in favor of refusing to fight.
Me, I'd rather not get involved in political activities. So if we have a meeting and we have to vote, I'll oppose it. But if the organization chooses to do it, then it has to be done. That's just the way it is.
To the Celestial Alliance, historically more distant from the CCP, China was the taboo subject of the interview. The Triad has many assets there.
They are from local. They are loyal to Taiwan. But you know, they are gangsters. The only one thing they care is the money they can make.
After preaching in the desert, MP Wang now chairs the National Defense Committee.
If we are aware, democracy can create very powerful weapon. We need to have some name list. When some special moment happened, need to be detained to contain their activities. Zhang Anle is one of that.
For the time being, White Wolf, the subject of several investigations, is under close surveillance. He's suspected, for example, of facilitating the entry of Chinese people via a bogus travel agency.
I don't care how public opinion attacks me. Imprisonment? I don't care. Sacrifice my life? I don't mind. It's an honor.
Placed on the sidelines in Macau, Broken Tooth reappeared in the Philippines.
此時此刻，非常高興，隆重地召開了世界紅門歷史文化協會成立大會暨紅幣發行菲律賓站活動。
At the head of his company, Broken Tooth wasn't content with promoting a cryptocurrency, a prized tool of organized crime. He also presented himself as the founder of a new Hongmen organization. The Hongmen are the ancestors of the Triads. This secret society took refuge in Taiwan after the war, then fell into decline, becoming a kind of Chinese Freemasonry. Liu, a Taiwanese retired civil servant, has been the spiritual leader for 30 years of an association that claims this heritage.
那
This is a far cry from the overthrow of the Jing, reinstate the Ming era. The Hongmen have two goals: politics and business. A few years ago, I was invited to give a lecture on the Hongmen to our brothers in Macau. That's where I met Broken Tooth. I'm very close to him. The 14,000, of course, they're Hongmen. They've just taken a different path. Their Mafia side is more pronounced. That's the only difference.
With this endorsement, Broken Tooth was able to restore his criminal past and establish himself throughout Southeast Asia, where the Chinese and Hongmen diasporas are present.
In the Philippines, for example, the Hongmen control the entire underground economy.
In Malaysia, home to 500,000 Hongmen, Broken Tooth invested in a high-tech company before taking off with the cash. Elsewhere, he sold shares in a glittering casino hotel that would never see the light of day. It's no coincidence that Broken Tooth went to these places. He claimed to be part of Xi Jinping's Great Silk Roads project. With his security company, he sold protection to Chinese businessmen throughout Asia, as far afield as Kazakhstan, a strategic hub.
When China started this project, it faced difficulties and obstructions, so China sometimes appeals to the Hongmen's local influence. We have relationships at all levels of the party. I regularly receive messages asking for the Hongmen's help.
In Cambodia, where he set up his headquarters, Broken Tooth welcomed the Deputy Prime Minister in person. And posed for a photograph in the armchair of the army chief with whom he was associated.
Sometimes, local leaders need Hongmen to do certain things. For example, oppose a political opponent or solve local problems.
His influential networks enabled Broken Tooth to build gigantic, completely uncontrolled complexes in Cambodia and on the Myanmar-Thailand border, such as Saixigang. All this eventually drew the attention of the West, which keeps a watchful eye on Chinese expansion.
We believe that he goes through the Communist Party's International Affairs Department in Beijing. He has a lot of ties with people in the People's Committees.
Whilst he will work with Chinese Communist officials, I don't think it would be in the sense of his own motivation or commitment to his country, but simply as a means to be able to continue to operate freely, continuing to make money, and continuing to enjoy the life he's become accustomed to. Broken Tooth walks the interests of Broken Tooth.
Broken Tooth operated highly profitable online casinos during the COVID era when travel was restricted.
We have identified official Chinese businesses associated with the government that were investors in Saixigang. But I think they have been cut because we identified them.
The region boasts some 20 similar infrastructures, all in the hands of various mafia groups. These no-go zones, where 100,000 criminals are believed to have settled, also serve as a base for drug trafficking, cybercrime, and human trafficking. These 3 young Taiwanese were ensnared by a branch of Bamboo Union, lured to Cambodia by false job offers.
当下被他们扣留护照的时候，我就是不能出园区的。对，然后每天基本上上班就是12个小时，然后很经常要加班。
The group was forced to run internet scams, a lucrative business in the COVID era.
你有没有就是曾经有人就是拒绝，然后就直接要逃跑，然后你们有看到发生什么事情吗？
就是被打。
哦，顶多就是被抓到被打这样，
或者是就是被转卖，就是他们可能被打之后，然后被转卖。
转卖就是卖到别的地方是吗？
对。
他们都会说卖到其他黑公司。对啊。
这样。
没有，你来看一下，我觉得太有兴趣了。好的。
他是跟我们一起同行，然后就是一起飞过去柬埔寨的。对，然后到之后听到他的消息是他被丢在路边，
就是那个脚整个挖了很大洞，要整个烂掉了。
对。
有几个故事是比较可怜的啊，女生就被性侵之后就怀孕。
These 3 victims were released a month before this interview, but thousands of others are still believed to be held captive, including some in the Broken Tooth complexes. He was spreading his web. In Palau, a small island country with 18,000 inhabitants, he founded a Hongmen branch and signed a contract with the island's president to construct a gigantic hotel casino.
帕勞你知道係世界上最靚嘅地方，呢度就有機場、有碼頭。為到我特區之後就會全面會應用紅幣嘅，到我特區裏面，啱啊！買樓、買房嘅賭場攞籌碼乜都得嘅。
The broader strategic problem of that is people like Broken Tooth coming in could have a deep impact and turn the region into a money laundering hub. Secondly, those sorts of large foreign investments allow you in many Pacific nations to have undue influence on political processes.
Shortly afterwards, in association with a former Chinese soldier, Broken Tooth attempted to set up a special economic zone on the island of Bougainville, just a stone's throw away from Australia.
這個地方就係我等於澳門咁嘅地方，一個特區，海關、碼頭、機場，乜都係我自己説了算。
It's an incredibly strange and coincidental that at a time when Bougainville is seeking further independence from Papua New Guinea, that a figure like this would go into Bougainville. It offers a window of possibility that, that this may have been directed by Beijing.
It required the intervention of the United States to thwart Broken Tooth's plans. The Secretary of Defense came to Palau in his turn to convince the island's ruler to halt his plans.
For bringing the nice weather to Palau. Well, thank you, Mr. President. The United States and Palau have stood side by side
This is especially important today as we continue to work alongside our allies and partners to protect that international system that is under threat from China and its ongoing destabilizing activities in the region.
In 2021, Broken Tooth was the first Triad member to be sanctioned by the US government. He was accused of corruption, drug trafficking, human trafficking, and having links to the Chinese Communist Party.
"本人爱国人士，未曾假借“一带一路”名义从事任何违法的行为，请美方慎言。"
In Palau, the police discovered a villa housing dozens of enslaved workers from Asia, and numerous members of the 14K Triad were arrested. But Broken Tooth was safe in China, where he received a quasi-official award for his contribution to international economic cooperation.
Probably lots of people we'd like to extradite from China. But he's not illegal in China, obviously. You know, when I look at China, I find it very difficult to identify legal from illegal. The Chinese don't really have a distinction between legal and illegal. They put a label on it whenever they don't like it for political reasons. And so when they say they're fighting corruption, it's really a political tool that they're using to get rid of the opposition.
It was this ambivalent conception of legality that brought about the downfall of Broken Tooth's close enemy, Macau's junket king, Alvin Chow. In 2020, the Australian police dismantled a vast drug trafficking network operated from China by the Triads. They discovered that the money it generated was laundered through an Australian casino controlled by Alvin Chow. But that's not what caused his fall from grace in the eyes of the Chinese regime.
You know, organisations like Sun City industrialised the movement of cash and high rollers from mainland China into Australia to assist in that, with a range of very high-profile members of the Chinese Communist Party involved in that gambling.
One of these, a billionaire, was suspected of having laundered $800 million in 1 year. These public revelations gave Xi Jinping the opportunity to bring down the powerful Alvin Chow.
有謠言話內地就進行咗一個係針對住太陽城反罪惡嘅行動。我衷心咁樣呼籲大家唔好再轉發或者造謠，對一啲危害我個人聲譽、危害我公司、危害澳門經濟嘅一啲消息。多謝大家。
Despite all his protections, victim of a clan struggle, Alvin Chow was arrested and sentenced to 20 years in prison for belonging to a criminal organization. Xi Jinping's China was becoming less and less welcoming, but the Triads still had the rest of the world.
We're present all over the world. In Europe, local organizations call on us to help them expand. We're in contact by phone, by internet. We go there to take part in economic activities. The local mafias welcome us everywhere, in Europe and America. In France, there are Chinese communities, but not very large ones. We got there very early through migration. Wherever there's a Chinatown and a Chinese diaspora, Celestial Alliance is present.
In Europe, the major triads of Hong Kong and Taiwan rely mainly on local gangs. They specialize primarily in money laundering. According to the police, they're the shadow bankers of organized crime. In Aubervilliers, a Paris suburb, a network that laundered the proceeds of drug trafficking from Northern Europe through textile import-export companies was dismantled. But the police authorities struggle to combat organizations they know very little about. The arrest in Italy, after a 6-year investigation of the representative of a small Hong Kong triad, was an exception. This man had begun to unify the Chinese gangs in Europe. In addition to prostitution and forced labor, he ruled over the road transport of Chinese imports to Europe, the arrival point of the Silk Roads. Phone taps revealed contacts with Chinese officials. Europe, however, is not the triad's priority.
There are a lot of us in North America. Most of the leaders of the Chinese diaspora have joined the Hongmen. If they want to do business, if they want to hire people, they have to work with the Hongmen. Their influence is even stronger today than before.
The Triad's gateway to America is Vancouver, home to the continent's oldest diaspora and a haven for wealthy Chinese who come here to invest their fortunes. The Sun Yee-on, 14K, and Celestial Alliance are firmly established here, and the local economy is under their rule. Journalist Sam Cooper began his investigative work after discovering a Secret Service report, buried 20 years earlier, which highlighted the political risks linked to the presence of the Triads.
In my own estimation and in reports from sources directly involved in Canadian intelligence and law enforcement, Vancouver is probably the primary beachhead or attack point for Chinese state-sponsored activity in the Western world outside of Hong Kong and Taiwan. This is what Vancouver represents. where you see state-sponsored United Front handlers, intelligence handlers directly associating with convicted drug traffickers involved in the worst kind of activity undermining Canadian society.
Sam, this is really something, and law enforcement worldwide is looking at Vancouver as a cautionary tale.
That's right. The law enforcement experts.
Cooper revealed how several of Vancouver's Chinese mafia bosses had established close relations with local politicians, or those at the highest level of government.
We see all these Chinese businessmen surrounding Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. We hear reports that they are lobbying him on, activity that would benefit China. Some of them donating to his family foundation. Everyone surrounding him, almost everyone, can be connected to either United Front activity or investigations into casinos and organized crime.
In Canada as well, the Triads knew how to be patriotic. In 2019, they were involved in violent attacks on pro-Hong Kong demonstrators. They regularly harass or spy on dissidents. The Chinese diaspora is under close surveillance by Beijing, which fears its contamination by Western democracy.
I talk to people in the community. They know that the Chinese consulate standing next to gangsters is out to control them. So what is an asset to Canada, and that is our multicultural society, is being turned against Canada as a weapon due to the weakness of laws in Canada.
Sam Cooper's investigative work prompted the Canadian government to set up a commission of inquiry.
It allows criminals and bad actors to exploit the very things that we value. FinTrack doesn't appear to be effective.
It revealed a mafia political stranglehold with the complicity of Canadian banks and politicians, as well as electoral interference. The commission also confirmed the staggering scale of dirty money invested in Vancouver. A casino owned by a triad was believed to have laundered tens of millions of dollars. It's no coincidence that the Port of Vancouver became the gateway to a drug that is ravaging North America, causing the worst health crisis in its history.
All of this money laundering activity coming from China, all this flood of cash could be connected to the fentanyl precursors that are being shipped into Vancouver and cooked up in labs. We can see when we travel to Vancouver in the downtown, one of the worst death zones in the Western world.
Fentanyl is 100 times more potent than heroin, 100 times more lethal. And it is infinitely more profitable. The major triads have joined forces to import fentanyl into the United States, their primary market. Its components arrive via Canada and Mexico, where the cartels handle processing and transportation. The triads now control certain cartels, whose profits they also launder.
In Mexico, they no doubt do things that are a little bit more borderline. We don't manage that part. We can't go to the United States, so we don't control what happens there.
Despite requests from the US authorities, the Chinese government is doing nothing to stop the flow of fentanyl. Its components are produced in factories in China itself, exported and then processed by the Triads. It's even thought by some that communist China, via the Triads, might be waging a new opium war. As a form of revenge against the West, which in the 19th century imposed the devastating opium trade on China with the help of the Triads. Over time, the balance of power may change, but the Triads remain.
I'm tired. Do I think I've made the right choice? I just tell myself that I've chosen this path, so I have to continue on it to the end.
In an ideal world, the Siggy would like to create a startup company.
I want to ensure that this organization continues to expand with a more international perspective, and that it has more the look of a traditional company.
A week after this interview, the Iron Tyrant was arrested in connection with an old extortion case and sentenced to a year in prison. Broken Tooth declared that he wanted to unify the Triads under the Hongmen banner to support Beijing against the United States. In Hong Kong, the lawyer, presumed head of the Sun Yat-sen, peacefully manages the affairs of the Hung family.
On my birthday, my grandson phoned me. Grandpa, is it true that you're from Bamboo Union? He'd seen it on the internet. Would you do it all over again? I said, yes, I would.
谢谢。